howdy to everybody out there who is tuned in with us. JV Wins, Dogon SS, as always. Y'all know the deal. Shouts out to everybody who's tuning in. Shouts out to everybody who's hit that like button, subscribe button. We certainly appreciate the support. Merry Christmas to all those who celebrated in that capacity and to all those who do not. Happy holidays. Hope everyone is having some good time, hopefully away from your work desk, away from your office, having some leisurely time, family time, getting to celebrate and just relax and enjoy the company of those that you care about. We are doing the same on our side, so we hope everyone gets to indulge in such pleasantries, man, because that's kind of what life is all about, right? Before we get into it for this evening's stream, as always, want to say hit that subscribe button. If this is your first time checking out what we do here on the channel, we certainly appreciate the engagement. Hit that like button, leave a comment. Let us know where you think we went right or wrong in any of the content that we publish here to the channel, because that's what it's all about. Kicking this logical content and growing the channel, regardless of whether you agree or disagree with our takes. We are just trying to be as honest and transparent as we can be about how we feel about some of these various topics. Now, with that out of the way, we are going to go ahead straight away, get right into it. Oh, also, don't want to forget to leave this out. The show is also on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and Amazon Podcasts. So that pretty much runs the gamut. I would say most people check out podcasts either on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. So we are in those places as well as on Amazon. So if you want to get the audio fix, if you're driving in a car, if you're, for whatever reason, in a position in which you can't watch the video, but you still want to listen, we also have begun uploading all of the full episodes to these various podcast outlets. So if you are so inclined, do your boys a big old solid and check us out in those places as well. We certainly appreciate it. All right, now introductions can dispense, and we can go ahead and get into this evening's topics. The first thing that we are going to discuss are interesting comments made by, at this point, friend of the channel, Fat Joe. We have mentioned Fat Joe or talked about a topic relating to Fat Joe in some way on this channel at least a few times before. So this is going to be a continuation of that particular series. This time, Fat Joe is taking issue with FBAs, which stands for Foundational Black Americans. Foundational Black Americans, a grassroots organization similar to Black Lives Matter. And they are essentially trying to set the record straight on certain aspects of society and culture that they believe are fallacies and misnomers, one of those being the origins of hip hop. Now, this is in reference to a documentary that Fat Joe wasn't a fan of. Fat Joe, there was a documentary, so I'm going to go ahead and pull up the screen here, and we'll go ahead and get right into it. Fat Joe is not a fan of the FBAs, to put it short, because the FBAs are asserting that the belief that hip-hop was created by both blacks and Hispanics sort of hand in hand. The FBAs are asserting that that is actually not true, that that's a lie, that hip-hop was pretty much solely created by black people, by the black community. Fat Joe, an old hip-hop head, somebody who owes his life to it. He's been rapping for a very long time. He does not appreciate the notion that anyone would suggest that it was solely created by black people. But the FBAs feel differently. They say that the idea that it was created by blacks and Latinos is a lie, that it was created just by black people. And Fat Joe isn't a fan. So this article says, Fat Joe rips Foundational Black Americans, calls them broke and black racist, backlash ensues. Fat Joe has some choice words about the Foundational Black Americans, which Joe referred to as Foundational Black Authority, as a guest on Math Hoffa's popular My Expert Opinion podcast. In a clip released on Saturday, which was December 21st, Joe called the organization broke black racists in response to their comments on Blacks and Puerto Ricans creating hip-hop together theories. Addressing rumors, Joe said these rumors were made by radical black racists. It's a group of these guys that don't want to hear Jamaican, don't want to hear Guyanese, don't want to hear a black guy not down with them. So their job is to criticize anybody who doesn't look like them, who ain't black American, the FBA, whoever these broke expletive is. I'm just keeping it a buck, and their mission is to attack everyone on Twitter. Fat Joe proceeds to describe the organization's leader. He tells Math Hoffa, "Do you see this expletive who runs them? Yo, man, you got to be effing kidding me." So they trying to change the narrative because they're not from New York. So they telling a whole other story. Naturally, Joey Crack's comments received backlash on social media. While many agree with Joe's longstanding claim on hip hop, others discredited the multi-platinum entertainer. So here is Joey Crack's disdain for the FBA in video form here, in which he voices his displeasure with what the FBA is trying to suggest about the origins of hip hop.
These rumors were made by radical black racists. Let's just say that. Okay, it's a group of these guys that don't want to hear Jamaican, don't want to hear Guyanese, they don't want to hear a black guy that ain't down with them. Right. So their job is to criticize anybody who don't look like them or who ain't Black American.
Who are these guys?
You want me to say a name? We're gonna give them too much clout.
I mean,
the FBA, Foundational Black Authority, whoever the fuck these broke niggas is. I'm just keeping it a buck, and their shit is to attack everybody on Twitter. You see this nigga who run them? Like, you know, your leader? Yo, man, you gotta be fucking kidding me, man. And so they trying to change the narrative. They're not from New York.
Right.
So they telling a whole nother story. This was whoopity doop wop. Yo, bro.
All right, there you go. So essentially what he's saying is, you know, the origins of hip hop are rooted in New York, but this organization doesn't have any ties or affiliations. They're not from New York, so how can you tell a different story? Is basically is what he's trying to say here. The article goes on to say, against Joe, an ex-user tweeted, "He ain't lying though. Like in as balls as it gets on every level, and I don't agree and march to the FBA beat. They called me an immigrant or a tether, and I don't even know what the F that even means." Another user would co-sign Fat Joe's broke claim about the FBA. To be fair, most FBA agents are broke. I personally cannot confirm nor deny any of that. With Joey Crack at the front of the conversation, the question about other ethnicities' involvement in the origin of hip hop has been a trending topic since the culture turned 50 years old in 2023. Other ethnicities have claimed involvement in creating the culture that history proclaims was created by African Americans in the Bronx. There you have it. Fat Joe clearly not very much of a fan of the FBA. What do you think about Fat Joe's comments?
All right, so much with this situation. I would say this. Let me start off with Fat Joe, Joey Crack. Am I good here, bro?
Yeah. Go ahead.
All right. Yes, I'm in a whole new spot, man. So I don't know if I'm catching lag or anything. So just let me know. But yeah, man. So let me start with Fat Joe. You know, Mr. I lied and over 90% of my rhymes. I don't really. I mean, it's not like I was really rocking with the dude in the first place. But after he said that 90% of the rhymes thing, whatever little bit of credibility he had with me, it was gone. And you know, and so he's been doing this thing where he's been running around and just being a pundit for, I guess, you know, hip hops, and just going out there and talking about various things. And you know, I never really, Fat Joe's industry. Fat Joe was never hip hop. He never put together a piece of work that made me go, you know, I should listen to what Fat Joe has to say about what hip hop is about, because he never really made hip hop himself. So I'll just say that. And as far as do I agree with his statement? I'll tie that in a bow at the end, and then let me get to the FBAs, this FBA situation. Now, black people, hear me out now. Hear me out, FBAs. All right. Because I don't even know. I like when I first started hearing that term, I was like, well, okay, just another category, I guess. But I didn't care so much for the rhetorics. I didn't care for the divisive way that they were using language. Like if there was somebody from a Caribbean or somebody from Africa, they were like, "Oh, you can't weigh in on this. You ain't this. You ain't that," and basically boxing them out. And I'm like, I don't get all of this animosity towards people that are in the same struggles as you. But the FBA people would say they don't have the same struggles because they're not FBA. And so to me, it's a bit bizarre, a bit of a psyop, if you ask me. And the people that are pushing it online, they are quite aggressive. So when Fat Joe is saying what he's saying it from a perspective of they are quite aggressive. But when it comes to the hip hop Latino aspect of this conversation, um, I don't get where Fat Joe is coming from in this situation. It's well documented who started it. It's well documented. The group that started it, the group that named it, the people that were pushing it. So I'm sure there was, Latinos in the bunch, but I don't want to say that. I would say that it was rather more of a black type of situation than Latinos. And no shade on Latinos. It's just more black people that were into it and doing it. So it's just more of that. So he has his of course his unique bias from being from the community, and he wants to put his people in the mix of the conversation, which is fine. But at the same time, I don't think Fat Joe was accurate. And last little thing I'll say about the FBAs before I let you go, as I mentioned, it's the language that they use is, in my opinion, uh, very divisive. I'm sure that this has something to do centered around the reparations conversations and other things like that go on online. And to me, I think that, like I mentioned, I think it's more of a psyop situation, uh, more of a divide and conquer kind of situation, and internet talking stuff that's meant to get people that are passionate about our people into these pockets where they're divided and categorized in these groups. So there's no actual unification. There's more infighting amongst each other than actually getting together towards a common goal. So that's why I don't really care for this FBA stuff. I never run around calling myself that. But that's how the game go. And I've got more to say, but I'll let you go ahead and take a swing at this. What are your thoughts on Fat Joe using expletives and all of that stuff too? What is your take on what Fat Joe had to say about this entire situation?
First of all, I'll say that I co-sign like 99% of what you just said with your assessment of both Fat Joe and the FBA.
Mm.
I will also add that I have seen various hypocritical elements of the FBA during their brief time in existence. For example, I'm pretty sure the FBA is totally in favor of the idea that if, as a black person, if you marry outside of the community, you therefore forfeit your right or ability to participate and talk about and help the community. I'm pretty sure they would co-sign such a rhetoric. Yet they seem to pick and choose when to employ that particular ideal based upon who we're talking about. Because, for example, they will co-sign champion a person like Dave Chappelle, for instance. And I'm a Dave Chappelle fan, but Dave Chappelle is not married to a black female. He's married to an Asian woman, but that doesn't seem to disqualify Dave Chappelle from having a particular level of agency and authority when it comes to whom we should listen to on black issues. So I just wanted to point that out, that I'm pretty sure they fall in line with that stuff, but like the rest of these organizations, there are still some hypocrisy sold into them that if you listen close enough, you can point out rather easily. Now, Beyond that, I will say, people like Fat Joe and the FBA who want to argue over the origins of hip hop. And I get it because, hip hop is one of these things. I've said it time and again. It's a sensitive subject because, I mean, if you remove hip hop, basketball, and football, what does the community have to cling to as things that we kind of dominate or perform at a high level or have a significant contribution culture wise in the West outside of those various areas, especially when you consider mainstream media popularization. When you're talking about an export that gets deployed to other regions of the world, which sort of serves to educate the rest of the world on what these people are about. What are the main things that they're exporting to some of these other regions of the world to kind of show these other regions of the world what people from our community are about? It's mainly the music and the sports. It's not really business or education or acumen. It's mainly sports and music. So if that's what we have to cling to, if that is our chief export, it becomes a sensitive issue. Therefore, it becomes something that is touchy and we will fight over, because without that, what do we have? And of course, I'm not saying that as a source of pride. I'm saying it as a source of an unfortunate reality that even to this day, that is still what we cling to as this is what we have. Mm-hmm. So it becomes a touchy issue, and that's what we fight and fuss and argue over. But if there's one thing that I will say to any side of this particular discussion, whether it's the Fat Joe side or the FBA side, you can sit around fighting over the origins of hip hop all you want. But if you really want to leave a lasting legacy while simultaneously helping future generations, maybe you should instead figure out a way to preserve the sanctity of it, because the future of it is completely in the toilet. The origin of the art form didn't start as a degenerative, commercialized celebration of bad behavior. Now, that was always a part of the content of it, but it wasn't mainstream into the collective consciousness of the people in a celebratory fashion the way it is now. And the main problem with the music, in my opinion, I would posit, is a lack of balance in terms of its representation. It's completely jumped the shark in terms of the kind of content that gets popularized. And I think it's leading current and future generations astray. So while you want to argue over the origins of it, I would suggest it's more constructive to figure out a way to leave a lasting legacy on how to preserve the future of it. Because if no one's talking about that, the future of it is going to continue to get worse and worse and continue to lead future generations into future toilets, into future advents of economical indentured servitude, into future advents of employment, into future advents of diminutive stature when it comes to your economic standing in this country. The tapestry of the music is playing a significant role, in my opinion, in funneling people into these various buckets. So I think that more people should be arguing over how we're going to preserve the future of it, as opposed to fussing and fighting over its origins. Who cares? It was 40 years ago. 50 years from now, no one's going to be talking about that when we're all drones and putting on MetaQuest helmets and living in 50-foot high rises because we've destroyed the earth. No one's going to be talking about that. We're only going to be focusing on what the current iteration of it is and how it's impacting everybody living in that moment in time. So I get it. Fat Joe is a hip hop old head. The FBAs are another one of these organizations that are trying to put boots on the ground to quote unquote set the record straight. But they're focusing too much, in my opinion, on the past. And I get it. If you don't know your past, then you don't know where you're going, that whole bit. So I understand it. But I think it's high time that we instead focus on the best possible way to preserve its future, because right now it's heading in a very dark direction and no one seems to care about how we can preserve it and create a little more balance in terms of its representation. So a little bit more of that and a little bit less of what happened 50 years ago, or at least maybe a bit of a balance of both, I think will take us a long way.
I mean, I get that. An emphasis on the future is definitely It's definitely in order. But, the part is, just like how you said, that whole bit of, you got to know your past and know where you're going. Well, where you're going is the future. And so you do have to know your past. And the reason why the reason why you need to know your past is because there's all kinds of things tied into that, self-confidence and the abilities that, it's like, when you're a young person, like when I was little, my mom told me that, I drew some stick stuff, some stick figures and a damn sun with a smiley face and, what I'm saying, the little wiggle things for birds. And my mom told me that, oh my goodness, you can draw. Oh, wow. And I was like, oh, wow, I can draw. And then next day I said, oh yeah, I can draw. Day after that, I can draw. I went to school. I can draw. And I was just drawing all the time to the point where, I got good at art. But, if you start always working at something, you'll start to get good at it and learn skills and stuff like that. But it was because I remember my mom telling me when I was a young person that you can draw. And there's a thing in your brain where, where you have this, there's a way that you could go. You can go any damn way you want. But if you have something that you lean on, that's something that's yours or whatever, your future will be whatever it is because you have a self-confidence, if you will, in whatever you're about to get into. So for instance, when we're dealing with, hey, y'all created rap. Did you know that? Or hip hop, did you know that? And most people will say, yes, we knew that. Okay, fine. Did you also know that you created martial arts? Did you know that? And they'll say, what? Nah, we didn't do that. Whatever people did that. No, sorry, you did that. Hey, did you know that you created whatever? You know what I'm saying? All forms of mathematics, philosophies, things that are being used by, modern people. Did you know that you created that? As a black person? And most black people would be like, what? No, you know. And so when you talk about Plato and all of these other Greek philosophers and stuff like that, and people would like to herald them as these, pioneers in human history, but those guys learned that from somewhere. But where did they go? Well, they went to Egypt to go learn that at the universities over there. And then once you start to look at the geography of the world, where Greece was located to where Egypt's located, it's not that far away. And they would make that commute to go to those universities to go learn the philosophies and stuff like that and mathematics that they were heralded as kings of. And so if our people don't know that we taught Socrates and Plato and all of these other people, all of the stuff that, everybody wants to hold them as the academic standard, but we were the ones who taught them, the nameless ones. Why are we the nameless ones in history books? We're the nameless ones in history books because, well, there's a structure going on where it's in books, it's out there. But why isn't it being taught in schools and universities and things of that nature? Why does history start with Plato with certain levels of philosophy? Why does it, blase, please, blase, blase? But once you trace history back, you'll see that there was a black face contributing to all of that. So when we talk about classical music, that's not something that was created by, whatever, that was created by us. And so if you know that you did these things, you would have a self-confidence in yourself to create things in the future. But when you look up and then you see that the superheroes in all textbooks don't look like you don't feel like you can accomplish. And so in a situation like this, where everybody can really trace back hip hop to it, because it's not that far ago. All right. Yeah, it's something that was ours. Yes, it got co-opted and bastardized, much like anything else. All right. And it's gotten co-opted and bastardized to the point to where our people are out here behaving in such ways that we don't care for. So if, and I agree with you, the history of it, or the future of it is going in the toilet. I agree with that 1000%. But if people understand who started it and why they started it, maybe it can help a renaissance, for people that are going, hey, if I want to say that I'm hip hop, I need to go back to where it started and why it started. And what I'm talking about, all this trapping and baking soda and Pyrex and whipping with forks, That's not what hip hop is. Even though I can put words together, I'm putting words together in a detrimental way. That's not what the forefathers said. So if people did know the history of it and why it was even an art form to begin with and what direction it was going in, then it would go out. It wouldn't go into the toilet. So I hear your point. You know what I'm saying? We need to focus more on the future for sure of what we got going on. But people's future is tied to their past. And they will make decisions based on previous knowledge. And if their previous knowledge starts at 2017, because that's, whenever a person's, whatever, or 2010 or 2005, then, their best reference is Jeezy and T.I. And they think that's hip hop. And Fat Joe running around talking about he hip hop. And that's why I started my first thing saying, like, he's nothing close to it. There's no piece of work that Fat Joe ever put together that anybody can classify as hip hop. This guy was mainstream garbage all the way through and through and lied in 90% of his music. So he is not an authority figure. He is no one to speak on this topic if he wants to act like he's some hip hop purist, which he isn't, because he's a liar. He admitted it. So I don't want to hear anything that this guy has to say. And it's not like I'm sitting here defending FBAs for that matter, because I already had my thing with them. And honestly, like I said, last thing I'll say about this with the FBAs at all, this whole thing, the reason why I feel like it's psyopy is because if these people profess to know history as much as they do know the history, then they would know that our people were populating this planet before anybody else. So we're foundational Earth people. We were all over the globe. There's pyramids all over the planet. Things that they have to dig up and all this stuff. There's pyramids and all of that stuff all over the planet, North America included. So yeah, we've been here. We've been everywhere. And so for them to be going around with all this divisive talk and all of these things merely for reparations or whatever else they're into, to me, I find it concerning, and I find it psyopy, and I don't stand for it. And so, and if any FBAs got something to say, bro, just at me in this comment section. I would love to have a spirited conversation with you. But yeah, man, Fat Joe can kick rock with his line behind. I'd say that.
Well, yeah, like you said, to his own admission, his cachet with any conversation is kind of null and void due to the fact that he very openly on CNN talked about lying in 95% of his rhymes. Yeah, I agree with all of that, but I believe at a certain point, because the youth is one thing, but I do think that there is a lack of lip service paid to what we're going to do to preserve any particular forms of art. And these kinds of talking points are not being delivered by those who do have education and knowledge of the history. Likewise, it's also being posited musically by those who understand the history and the knowledge. I've lost count of the amount of hip hop artists who, despite them being as old as they are and having the knowledge of the history that they have had based on various interviews and things that I've heard from them, still feel as though in order to be relevant as a current artist, they have to cop to the current sound, which to me does a disservice to the idea that we need to preserve the past in order to know where we're going with the future. So I think all the way around, we just need to do better in terms of how we talk about these things. But I think for organizations like FBA, they are clinging to this hip hop stuff, not because they want to preserve the past, but because they want to be able to retain ownership over something in the event that outside entities see an opportunity to leverage it in any sort of financial way. Like I think on an elementary level, and this is where I depart with organizations like Black Lives Matter and FBA, is I think at the end of the day, as philosophical and ideological as they want to be, a lot of this stuff boils down to the almighty dollar and what can we preserve and retain ownership of in the most effective manner, so that if anyone wants to leverage this financially, we get a piece of that pie. We get a stake in that claim because we want to be able to make some of this money too. I think at the end of the day, a lot of this is less about retaining community and cultural status, and more about being able to, you know, contribute in some kind of way meaningfully to the GDP in the future. And so that's kind of where I part ways when it comes to some of these organizations. I mean, hell, we saw the fallout with Black Lives Matter with the woman who runs the organization paying out members of her family with the proceeds to the organization, using it as tax write-offs. I don't know how that helped the community to pay her brother $250,000 a year or whatever the number was. Don't quote me on that. It was some number that was gifted to him as an employee, quote unquote, that he shouldn't have been making. And this is what was going on with an organization that purportedly stands to benefit the community as a whole. So I just don't like any of it. And if we really want to talk about, you know, the origins of hip hop, then let's also talk about the future. Because at this point, even people who are aware of that past are steering the future of it in the wrong direction, which is sad and shameful, but this is where we are. So more of these individuals who truly believe that they have the best intentions of the culture and the art and the people at heart need to talk a little bit more about the future, because otherwise no one knows where we're going and we have no leadership to steer the ship.
Exactly. And I'll say this, last thing I'll say is that, you know, if Fat Joe wants to call them broken and all this other stuff, yeah, I don't know what those people have going on. But one thing that you could say about, I would say about Fat Joe is that you're broke, sir. And when I'm not talking about your finances, I'm talking about your integrity as a person. And for anybody that paraded around lying in 95% of their rhymes, and then on top of that, when you were talking about these crazy things, you were talking about selling and peddling drugs and shooting brothers in the street. And you were lying about that. Why would you do that for so long? Everything that you have that you call a riches was off the backs of lying and talking about and promoting all unaliving and the selling of rugs. So I don't stand for anything that you talk about, Mr. Fat Joe. You don't have a leg to stand on. And I don't want to hear any more words from you, sir.
I can guarantee you you're going to hear more words from this.
We're going to cover it here, I swear. We better, so I can give him another lashing.
Oh, God. Shouts out to everybody on the chat, man. Shouts out to Cash God on the chat. Pumping Vinyl, Timothy Taylor. These are friends of the channel. Daryl Gibbs. So, you know, much appreciation to you guys for tuning in. I see you, Timothy. You say you FBA. You have one Caribbean great grandfather. Hey, man, like any of these, you know, movements, the individual is, I can rock with the individual. It's when the mass, when the whole gets together, that things get a bit misconstrued. So,
and on top of that, it has nothing to do with, see, and that's the science behind psyops, is that there's a thing that ties you to it, you know, because by all definition services, you know, I'm FBA, but why are they being divisive? I'm FBA, I'm Caribbean, I got a lot of stuff going. There's a lot of people that got things going on, and so there's no one black person running around here 1000% African Americans.
Well, we've talked about that before. Yeah. Until all of us do the due diligence to trace our true heritage, they'll be able to take advantage of this dynamic. So, you know,
and playing on people's ignorance, and then now creating all levels of division for what reason? Yeah. So I stand with all of my people, no matter where they're from, and that's why I say we're a global people. And once we acknowledge the fact that we are foundational planetary people, then there's no need to divide. If one person was born on the other side of the globe, then, you know, another. So, hey, man. So that's why I don't stand for the divisive talk. I'm all about unity, and they don't seem to be doing much of that. So that's why I have my reservations about what they talk about.
Yeah. Well, I've said before, you know, my firm belief is that race is less about skin color and region, and it's more about a cultural construct. So your experiences culturally within any location or region are going to shape your cultural identity. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't matter whether a person is Guyanese, Jamaican, Caribbean, or whatever. You were born and you're a citizen in this particular country, you're going to have the same experiences that I had. So therefore, you're, for all intents and purposes, black, which completely delegitimizes the mantra behind organizations like FBA, in my opinion. But I think that they make a concerted effort, as you intimated, to kind of sow those particular seeds of identification, to have people feeling as though they are members of one specific tribe over the other. But at the end of the day, like I said, I think it's all about money. I personally, this is my opinion, I think a lot of this at the end of the day, bottom line, is about money and the ability to leverage something that you seemingly own if someone sees an opportunity to make money off of it. And hip hop is that golden goose for us, quote unquote, FBAs. And so that's why there's this that's why there's this stern mission to be able to retain as much ownership over it as possible. That's why you get so many of these arguments and back and forths.
1,000. Hey, Fat Joe, get the hell out of here, bro.
Yeah, but I feel like we'll talk about you again. So come on back, bro. Come on back.